Welcome everyone to The Detail. I am your host, Cathy Antunes, and you are listening and watching The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. Well, I'm recording this on December 8th, 2021, exactly 1 year ago today. My guest wrote a letter resigning from the 12th Circuit Judicial Nominating Committee in the state of Florida. He was a Republican, an attorney, and made a decision that what he was seeing warranted ending his service. Ron Filipkowski, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really appreciate you making the time.
I'm happy to do it.
Okay, well, so I want to start it off because it was the treatment by the state of Florida of Rebekah Jones. And obviously in December of 2020, we had been through nearly a year of the pandemic. And Ms. Jones, who's actually running for Congress now against Matt Gaetz, right?
Yes.
Man, that's an interesting race.
Yes.
But Rebekah Jones was maintaining a database for the state of Florida Department of Health, and there was contention about the information she was sharing. So, with that as a backdrop, Ron, and you're an attorney in Sarasota County, you were a Republican, had served for 10 years. What prompted your resignation? Just walk us through what happened for you.
It was really an evolution of things incrementally, which ultimately on January 7th resulted in me leaving the Republican Party and becoming a Democrat. The final straw, of course, was January 6th.
Yeah.
But it began, of course, with the nomination of Trump, and I was against Trump. I voted for Marco Rubio in the 2016 primary.
Mm-hmm.
And did not vote for Trump. I voted none of the above in 2016 in the presidential race, voted Republican in all the other races.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I was so disgusted by Trump that I just checked out, tuned out, turned off the news, watched a lot of sports, read a lot of history books, and just sort of dropped out of current events, the news, and hid from it, really. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, COVID happened, the lockdown happened. Now I'm forced to watch the news. I'm forced to watch the briefings every day. It was really the first time I got a prolonged exposure to what was happening with the Trump presidency. I'm embarrassed to say that I paid no attention, but really I hid from it. And but what I saw then was just horrifying to me. And then that evolved into DeSantis, of course, being one of the first states to kind of throw it back open and say, okay, we're not participating in any of these restrictions.
Yeah.
Florida's open, declared victory over COVID, and threw it all open. And of course, that's when Rebekah Jones sort of started to come to the fore, pushing back on some of what he was saying as far as the COVID numbers. And what made me suspicious was not necessarily what she was saying, but what he was saying. What he was saying is, hey, I don't think that we should count every death as a COVID death if somebody has a pre-existing condition. I'm like, well, so if somebody has high blood pressure and they die of COVID, he doesn't want to count that as a COVID death.
Yeah.
Because how do we know it wasn't the high blood pressure? I mean, there were statements like these that he continued to make. And then at the same time, she is out there saying they're covering up the numbers. They're not reporting data accurately. And again, I have never vouched for the credibility of Rebekah Jones. I don't know if some of the things she was saying was true or not. That wasn't the issue for me.
Yeah.
And then, of course, she was fired. And then I began to follow her on social media just to kind of keep track of what she was doing. And then it was the raid that really, set me off. And as I put in my letter, which I posted, the reason why I resigned really wasn't about Rebekah Jones per se. And I've said this repeatedly at the time. It was about Ron DeSantis. I thought that two things were happening. One, he was using the police power and the criminal justice power of the state government to intimidate or silence a political opponent. And number two, he was doing that at the time when there were leaks happening out of the state health agencies, and he was trying to stop those leaks by sending a message, I thought, to state employees that they better stop talking to the media or talking to outside sources about what's really happening in Florida. And so those two things caused me to resign. And look, I knew I wasn't going to be reappointed. I was already openly supporting Biden by that point.
Mhm.
And so I knew that when my term was up, I was done anyway. But I resigned 2 years early to sort of make a statement. I certainly did not expect it to be national news. I expected it to be a Sarasota story.
Yeah,
But
right.
I think that it took on a life of its own.
Yeah, because I had first, I use social media. There's a group, Citizens for Sarasota County, that I moderate. I became aware of your resignation on Now This. It's a platform on social media, and there you were announcing or talking about your resignation. And I do think, Sarasota being a Trump county, or, this is a county that voted for Trump, but yet in a lot of ways, it's a purple county in a lot of ways. Certainly when you look at charter amendments, Sarasota can be quite progressive with the environment and all.
On
So
school issues too.
exactly. Yeah. And I'd love to talk with you about them during this conversation. But I read your resignation letter, and I did want to ask you, because you said you looked at the warrant, the search warrant. Is that
Right.
right?
Yes.
What about that was concerning to you? This was Rebekah Jones's house,
Yeah, it was really broad. There was two things that concerned me. Number one, it was brought to a new judge who had just been appointed by DeSantis, I think 10 days before.
Okay.
And he had a very partisan track record, which is not very surprising. In
Mhm.
fact, for my interviews to be appointed to the position with DeSantis's general counsel office, all they asked me about was politics. I
Really?
wanted to talk about what I thought the role of a judicial nominating commissioner was, weighing qualifications, background, experience. They didn't want to talk about that. They wanted to talk about politics, which was a little off-putting to me, but I was
Right.
honest, and I told them my background, which was solidly Republican,
Mhm.
and so they didn't have an issue.
Okay.
But let's see, I lost my train of thought. Oh, you were
Oh,
talking
it
about
was
the warrant.
warrant.
So
Yeah.
yeah, the judge had just been appointed. He had never practiced criminal law, had almost no experience, and I just thought it was criminal, and I just thought it was very odd for that in such a high-profile case, where that certainly would get a lot of media attention, that they would assign it to this particular judge
A
to
rookie.
weigh the probable cause.
Yeah, he was just a rookie. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then number two was the breadth of the warrant, the fact that the warrant allowed them to seize basically all of her devices, and there was no limitations on minimization on what they could go in and do with them. Now, her attorney subsequently filed motions to restrict how much they could get into, but at the time the warrant didn't say that, and so those were a couple of the issues that I had with the warrant.
Yeah. So, we're learning, or just a few days ago, a week ago, maybe, Ron DeSantis put forward the idea of having a state guard in addition to the National Guard.
Yeah,
And I know a lot of people, in the context of what you're talking about, which, you were concerned that he, this judge and DeSantis, well, Ron DeSantis claims he had nothing to do with Rebekah Jones, what happened to her in terms of the search. Am I getting that right? He said he had nothing to do with it, right?
well,
You're
his
laughing.
now fired spokesman
Mm,
came out that day and said Ron DeSantis was, of course, out of state conveniently at the time,
mhm.
unavailable to be reached for comment. And his spokesman came out and said he didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, that was,
But then DeSantis later had to say, oh yeah, I did know something about it, but I wasn't directly involved. So, I mean, and Fred Piccolo, the spokesman, was fired a short time later for a rather bizarre 4 a.m. tweet that he sent out a month or two later
Hmm.
that was unrelated.
And Piccolo is a familiar name to people in Sarasota because Rick Piccolo runs our airport. And so this was his son, Fred, Frederick. So dad's Rick and the son is Fred. I don't know. It does seem, I think our governor does seem to go through chiefs of staff. I've heard that, that there's some churn.
Goes through everybody.
Office. Does he? Yeah.
There is no person around him other than his wife that has been with him for an extended period of time. It's a revolving door, just like the Trump White House was with staff. There's no loyalty either way.
Wow. Okay. And so, this overextension, or, that's a kind word. I mean, abuse of that authority, that police authority is, what prompted your concern. What's your take on this idea that DeSantis has right now that we need another guard? We need a state guard.
Well, it's bizarre. I mean, you have to look at it too in the broader context. You can't, everything that he does is he defends in a vacuum. In other words, he'll take something in isolation and go, well, this particular act by me, reenacting this 80-year-old concept of a Florida state guard, there's nothing wrong with that. It's going to be small. It used to exist 80 years ago. We're just reinstating it. Well, you have to look at it in the broader context. Number one, he passed during the Black Lives Matter demonstrations last summer, he had the law passed that said, we can crack down very heavily on demonstrators and protesters. Well, now he's got his own private, guard to enforce that. If local police won't or National Guard won't, he's got his own troops. That's number one. Number two, I mean, clearly the more immediate reason is because of Biden insisting that the National Guard troops get vaccinated. And that's really what this is more about, which is saying, hey, we're going to have our own guard and they don't have to be vaccinated. And I think it also comes with him saying, as part of his presidential aspirations, to law enforcement officers, to military people that are getting kicked out of the military, come to Florida, I'll have a spot for you, whether it's with one of our law enforcement agencies or in our new state guard after you've been kicked out of the Army for not getting vaccinated. So it all dovetails into that. A lot of it is symbolic. He's playing to the Fox News crowd, but a lot of it is not symbolic. It's real world frightening stuff.
Yeah, it is real world. Subsequent to your resignation, were you on Twitter before you, before you decided to leave the Judicial Nominating Committee?
Well, I got on 75 days before the election because at that time I was volunteering, doing some things with Now This Is One, the PAC. Did some commercials for them. I did some stuff for Republican Voters Against Trump, which is Sarah Longwell and Bill Kristol's group. I did some stuff for Lincoln Project. So I was doing those kinds of things, billboards, radio, TV, but I thought, is there anything else I can do? And I knew my own personality is very relentlessly obsessive, as anyone who follows me on Twitter now knows. And so I set an expiration date. When I set up my Twitter account, I put on there day 1 of 75 on Twitter. And the expiration date was election day. And I said, well, because I knew myself, and I knew that if I don't stop myself with some kind of hard deadline, I will quickly become obsessed. And so, but of course, what happened is, as we got closer to election day, it became very clear, as I said on Twitter repeatedly, this election is not going to be over on November 3rd. And I knew I had to stay on, and thank God I did, because I then devolved into my next phase, which is tracking these right-wing groups that had a problem with the election and were basically trying to stop the democratic process. And so from the election to J6, I was completely immersed in following those groups.
Yeah. So, well,
and now I can't get off. Now I
Right. I
can't
was going to say,
stop.
I was like,
Yeah,
whoa,
like any
now
addict.
you're an
Yeah.
important voice on Twitter, Ron. And if you know, those listening or watching this, uh, Twitter is something, you know, I check in on January 6th, actually. I checked into Twitter to know what was going on. It was Twitter that really showed the real-time insurrection events, you know, what was happening. And so since that time, you have now roughly a quarter million followers on Twitter. But you know, Ron, I don't know, you know, I was born in the early 60s. I was a history major. So this is something that I studied. Never in a million years would I have thought that in the United States, we would have a violent uprising to overturn an election without any credible evidence. And let's face it, these courts are full of Republican appointees, right? That are evaluating these cases that have been brought by Sidney Powell, who recently had dinner with our state senator and the leader of the Republican
I
Party.
posted the photo on Twitter of that meeting.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
After he deleted it?
Yes, well, he deleted it, but I screen grabbed it. So
Yeah, I'm getting good at this.
the reason why it exists in the Twitterverse is because we screen grabbed it.
Grabbed it. Yeah.
Once we posted it and people reacted to it, he deleted it.
He deleted it. Yeah. So, you know, just to flesh it out, if you're not familiar, you know, Joe Gruters, who's heading up the Republican National Committee Election Integrity Committee, SB 90, you know, Florida had what Ron DeSantis called an efficient, transparent election. There was nothing wrong with it. It set the standard. And now we're seeing voter legislation. SB 90 has been called a voter suppression bill. The League of Women Voters is litigating against it. The NAACP, Southern Poverty Law Center, veterans groups, disabled groups, saying that this is limiting access for Florida voters. You know, getting back to this idea, you know, Ron, I voted for many Republicans in my lifetime. I was an independent for over 30 years. And what happened on January 6th was a shock to me. And how can Americans, and let's face it, they were mainly white Americans. I don't think that people of color doing that would be alive, honestly. There was, you know, you didn't see many people of color storming the Capitol, but it was a shock. And I think extremely serious. I mean, you know, and yet I think there's a way people want to turn away from it.
Move on. Right.
Yeah, which this phrase "move on," yet it may be one of the most important events in my lifetime, and for our country in our lifetime. So walking back from that, what's it like? Because I was an independent and I'll vote both ways, but honestly, I voted often Republican. I don't recognize this group anymore, this party. I'm not big on party politics, but I did appreciate a lot of, you know, what the Republican Party used to stand for. What's it like for you? I mean, you were a Republican, you've worked with Bill Kristol. There's Republicans out there like you who are saying this isn't it. Where are you at these days with it? And what are you seeing? What are you talking about when you track these groups?
Well, that's two different big questions.
Okay, so we'll do
your
one
last
and then the
phrase is an entirely different question.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't do that to me.
No, I won't. We'll do one thing then the other. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I will say this. I became a Republican intellectually, really. I mean, I spent my younger years as a Marine and a college student like you, a history major, reading everything left and right. I read The Nation, and I read The New Republic, and I read National Review, and I watched liberal shows, and I watched conservative shows, and I read the whole spectrum. And I think that's what you're supposed to do when you're young, and that's what actually used to happen in this country. And we called it a liberal arts education, where you're exposed to everything, and then you decide where you stand. And that's sort of how it happened with me. Nobody pushed me a certain way. I didn't know if I was going to turn out to be Republican or Democrat. And I guess I just gradually at that time, early 90s, late 80s, gravitated towards certain aspects of conservatism. But, you know, it bears no resemblance to now. When did it change? I started to see, you know, I was president of the South Sarasota County Republican Club. At the time, Obama was elected. And I was president of that club for 2 years, which is the second largest Republican club in Florida. And, you know, it was really, that was the beginning of it, was Obama. I started to pick up the undercurrents of racism and anti-Muslim stuff, you know, with the birther and the Hussein and going after his pastor and a lot of the anti-immigration stuff. And I became very uneasy and uncomfortable with that. But you know, it was always like you saw with John McCain at the famous thing where he told the person to, you know, sit down and shut up when they called Obama. That's really, I was doing a lot of that too. And I always considered myself a John McCain Republican. And so I was putting a lot of that stuff down in my club at the time in 2009 and 2010, saying, look, we're not going to do that. We're not going there, you know, and they would just quietly slink off. And I think what happened with Donald Trump is he plugged into that, and he said what they thought. I guess what surprised me is the fact that there were so many other people. I thought it was a fringe element who silently, quietly thought those same things, or maybe had never thought about it, but Trump put it in their head. And I just watched in 2016 how much the party changed overnight with his nomination and then his election, because then Republicans said, well, this is our path to victory. This is the way we got to go from now on. So what I saw is a lot of the more educated, professional conservatives like me were very uncomfortable and stepped back. But at the same time, he brought in a lot of new people, into the party, people who had never voted before, people who had never registered to vote before, a lot of the more rural, blue collar people who had never been involved in the political process. And he brags about this all the time, about how all these new people he brought into the party. He unquestionably did.
Yeah.
But these aren't the kind of people that I want to be associated with. And so the party, not only was it the people that were in the party changed, to me, a lot of the good people fled, and they were replaced with some really bad people. And I think that's where the party's at now. It's thoroughly radicalized. The handful of people like me who are still hanging around, like Kinzinger and Cheney and these people, they don't fully realize it yet, but they're done. After 2022, there will be no more of those people in the party anymore. Their days are numbered. They just don't know it yet. I mean, Mike Pence's days are numbered. Mike Pence has no political future, but he thinks he does. Yeah. They're delusional about what has happened underneath their feet.
Okay, so, you know, it's hard for me to talk about this without going back to, because you talk about who came into the party, right? And that the people that came in made you know, people uncomfortable. And of course there's this very ugly element. So let's go to the groups you're tracking, but I also want to talk about that phenomenon as well. On Twitter, you've got 250,000 followers. So I assume that really took off this past year. Is that right?
Well, you know, that's not easy to do when you're not famous and you're not a journalist and you don't have the blue check next to your name, and you're not part of a PAC or an organization. You're not an elected official. I've solely done it based on content, based on what I put out. I had 0 followers a year ago. Like you said, I have 249,000 now. Yeah. And I think that I've tried to do it with integrity, with honesty, grift-free, ambition-free. I want nothing from it. I have no ulterior motive. And I think that's refreshing to a lot of people, because it seems like a lot of the big influencers on Twitter all have some kind of grift going or some
Right.
kind of angle going that they're playing or selling
Right.
t-shirts or coffee mugs.
It's
I
a
don't do any of
marketing
that.
tool for a lot of people. They're marketing themselves in one way or another.
Yeah.
But you stood up and said, this is not right. Like, we have a problem,
Yeah.
and I do think that that's compelling to a lot of people. Where are those voices these days? You're one of them.
Yeah. So I
Um,
think at first people were very suspicious of whatever my motives were, but I think that now people, they think they understand that I'm not a bad guy and I have no ulterior motives. And so
mhm.
I think that a lot of people have come over to me during the last 6 months or so that were maybe a little standoffish at first, but also it's the help that I have from my team that I mentioned. I have 2 people that help me, and they have made me so much better on social media with the skills that they bring to the table that I have skills that they don't have,
Mhm.
and they have skills I don't have, and we complement each other really well. And we've worked together since right before in December of last year is when we started working together, because they saw what I was doing, tracking these right-wing groups before January 6th, and they stepped up and said, okay, we appreciate what you're doing, we like what you're doing, but you're a boomer. You don't really know what you're doing a lot with the internet, and
Yeah.
you need help. And
Mhm.
they're brilliant researchers, and
Yeah.
so they just stepped in and teamed up with me anonymously, quietly behind the scenes. And
Mhm.
every single day, I lean on them heavily for what we do, and they're both moms,
Okay.
and they're raising their kids and they're helping me.
And they're helping you, and they're helping to educate, right? The Twitterverse out there.
Yeah.
Ron, you said something, and I'll quickly remind everyone you are listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1 in Bradenton, Florida. And if you're worried about someone else's drinking but don't know where to turn, Al-Anon family groups can help. Al-Anon and Alateen offer a mutual support program for families and friends of alcoholics. To find a meeting, call 1-888-425-2666 or visit al-anon.org. There's so many things I want to ask you, Ron. I want to be sure that we talk about Sarasota County as like the cradle of a lot of the stuff that's gotten hatched and proliferated around the country. I actually think there are people here who are far more plugged in nationally and helping create these strategies, like the voter suppression stuff. So, but before we get there, you were a history major. I was a history major. I remember, people saying to me, what are you going to do with that? Like it's some kind of a waste of time. And my father was a college professor. He taught physics, and you can't fudge physics. Like, you have to know what you're doing. But he was concerned because he had a Jesuit education, and there's a real emphasis on history and civilization there. And if people don't have a grounding in how we got here historically, like the world did not begin when we were born. What I'm seeing, and the value of that liberal arts education, I recognize fascism when I see it. I recognize an autocrat when I see him. I recognize disturbing trends, and that I also recognize if it's coming from someone I happen to like, that's actually doesn't matter, because if the strong man is on your team and you allow this stuff, don't complain when there's a strong man on the other side. This is not what our founding fathers intended. And if you tell me about the quality of thinking out there, and maybe where we've got gaps in understanding in this country, and the strongman aspect, you know where are you at with that? I'm very concerned.
Well, I mean, I went to University of California, and so in San Diego, and it was almost all international students, and almost all my professors were international professors. I mean, they were from all over the world. And it was during the 80s, before, in the height of the Cold War. So obviously we spent a great deal of time studying that stuff, autocratic movements, rebellions, some autocrats installed by us,
Right. Yeah.
and all over the world. And we studied the history and how they rose. And so, yeah, probably like you, I was deeply immersed in that kind of stuff. And so, but you set that aside and you live your life. And then all of a sudden somebody like Donald Trump comes along and you recognize all the markers are there that you studied of all these people around the world, the character traits, the personality traits, the lack of if you criticize them, you're punished, you're excised. No platform. The Republican Party platform is, I pledge allegiance to Donald Trump.
They didn't even have a platform.
They had no platform.
Yeah.
And that was shocking to me. I mean, as somebody deeply involved in the party, and that platform always meant a lot to party activists and shaping it and arguing about it. And they just disbanded it. And that's just a clear sign of autocracy, and which is, and the no tolerance of dissent. Anybody who opposes the leader is out.
Yeah.
I would say to any elected Republican, I would challenge them in the 2022 elections I would say, I'm going to tell everybody to do this. If you go to any forum, say, name 3 things that Donald Trump did as president you disagree with, because they'll be so afraid to answer that question, because no amount of dissent is tolerated in the Republican Party anymore. You cannot criticize Trump. And so you put them in a position to either say he's infallible and perfect, which clearly he's not, or to state specific things that they disagree with him on, which will get them in trouble with the party. You have to put them in that lockbox to break this spell. You either reveal them as a complete sycophant to an autocrat, or force them to go against the autocrat, knowing that that's going to get them in trouble. And we've seen this time. We saw with my tweet yesterday with Dan Crenshaw. See how it played out. My favorite thing to do is go into the audience of small gatherings with Republican candidates or public officials where they're comfortable, where they don't believe they're on TV or being recorded, but somebody in the audience has a phone. And what we do, my team, is track those people in the audience, figure out who's going to be there through different markers and things that we look for. And then as soon as they post something, we watch it. And as we did with Crenshaw, when he ripped apart the members of the Freedom Caucus and said they're all frauds and grifters. And we posted that yesterday and it went viral. And today, all day, Dan Crenshaw has spent the day explaining to his Republican colleagues who are calling for his head and calling for him to be primary, that, he was taken out of context, he was misunderstood, he didn't name any specific names. So this is what we do.
Yeah.
We, in those rare moments when they tell the truth, we try and capture it and put it into the ecosystem.
So talk to me about, oh gosh, it just left me. The hollow. Okay, I do want to bring this down to Sarasota County, because here you are, a local person who took a stand, and now you have a national following, and a Republican calling out and changing parties. The Hollow is a venue, a wedding venue down in South County that has become a meeting place. But this first came to, full county awareness, I guess, when there was a mask waiver event that happened a few months ago, where this local chiropractor who was willing to write mask waivers for kids so they didn't have to wear them in school, was having this event. And Moms for Liberty was sponsoring this event. And there were photographs that came out of guys with assault weapons guarding, I don't know, was it General Flynn? We've got a cast of characters in Sarasota. Mike Flynn has moved here. A few years ago, Steve Bannon registered to vote here. We've got Patrick Byrne, the CEO of Overstock.com, who's bought property here and who's been involved in this election fraud claims. Sidney Powell just had dinner with Joe Gruters. It looks like they were at Catherine Harris's house. I mean, she was in the photo. And I'm just
Doug Logan
here.
with Cyber Ninjas, who is behind the audits.
Yeah,
Charlie
and
Kirk, Charlie Kirk with
Charlie
Turning
Kirk.
Point USA, who's behind all the school board stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can go on and on.
Well, and we just gave, the county, it's through the EDC, but the county commission, and Christian Ziegler has his own micro-targeted media, his own company. So he's involved in campaign activity, and I feel it's
whose wife was the co-founder of Moms for Liberty.
Right.
And he was at the January 6th insurrection. He was there.
Physically present. He left in an Uber when, my feeling is you threw all this wood.
He deleted all of his videos from his Facebook page. Yes.
Yeah, and he was tweeting "Stop the Steal." I'm starting to put out some of these tweets that I captured of his fomenting. I mean, I don't think you get to, gather all the wood for the fire, right? Which is what these guys were doing. These leaders, including Christian Ziegler, getting people all riled up about, stop the steal, election fraud, Martin Hyde doing the same thing, going to this event. And then do you get to be surprised?
Martin Hyde, whose campaign consultant is now Roger Stone.
Okay. So what is it about Sarasota? I mean, what's your take? And I'm disturbed. I mean, it's bad.
Well, I mean, on our sheriff, who I've known for many years, was controversially photographed at a QAnon booth when he was running for sheriff, was on the front page of the paper.
Some people are calling it SR QAnon.
Yeah, I think that they've been recruited to come here. They feel comfortable here. They feel this is a safe haven where they can do things and get away with it. And there's a comfortable political environment. I think, it's kind of like my family. One of my family members moved to Pasco County, and the next thing you know, 5 years later, they all live there. And so I think that that's happening in Sarasota. And it's actually pretty unnerving when you're doing what I'm doing, which is publicly going after them every single day and outing them on things they don't want to be outed about. And I live in the same town. Yes, right. I wish I was doing this in North Dakota, to be quite honest with you. But I'm here. And so
I got to tell you, it was a much smaller scale, but I had posted something in a Facebook group that's in Northport, and it was about masks. And, I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry and sold infectious disease medication. So, viruses and containing infections, something I professionally was trained on. And these people who were challenging me posted an aerial photo of my house.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you whistling to your friends to come and get me? It was pretty amazing.
If you look on social media, almost everybody who does sort of what I do, I don't think there's anybody that does exactly what we do, but there's people that do similar things. They're all anonymous accounts. You don't know their names. You don't know where they live. Not only am I doing it on I think a larger scale than they are, and more relentlessly than they are, I'm putting my name, address, photo, phone number, email on it. And the reason why I chose to do that, I started out anonymously the first few months. And then I decided to come out and say who I was, because I just feel like it's more effective, it's more credible. If I was anonymous, they could always guess that I was this person or that person, or this organization or that organization. Instead, I want them to know, hey, you know what? I'm one of you. I was a lifelong Republican. I was a Marine. I was a police academy director. I was a federal prosecutor. I was a state prosecutor. So all the crap of you're a grifter or you're a socialist or a Marxist doesn't work with me. They can't use that on me. And so hopefully they won't resort to a different method, but but anyway, I just think that obviously it comes with a great deal of risk. The two people that helped me, I would never name them, and they are definitely anonymous. But I've chosen to kind of put my name on it and just live with the consequences.
You know, and I think it's easy to hide behind anonymity. And we see on social media that people who are using obviously fake accounts feel a whole lot freer to be, nasty. The level of discourse just plummets. So I appreciate that you use your real name, and whatever I do is out there too. It's courageous. You recently posted about the Hollow and a gun class, safety class for 6-year-olds.
Mhm.
And I gotta say, Ron, in my world, the only gun safety a 6-year-old needs to know is don't touch that. And that shouldn't even need to be necessary because the gun is never in there accessible, right, to a 6-year-old. Can you talk to me about this place or what you know of it? And that seems pretty extreme. Is that? I've
Yeah,
never
I'll say,
heard of 6-year-old.
I was never anti-gun, ever, and I was a Marine, and but I had 5 kids, and I just chose not to ever own a firearm because I felt that the likelihood that with 3 boys, especially, that something bad was going to happen with them getting into it or somehow gaining access to it was far more likely than me ever needing it for self-defense. And so I just made the decision not to have one in my house at that time when they were little growing up. And so I cannot understand the fetishization of guns and AR-15s and all of this stuff. I don't understand the mentality. I can't get a hold of it. But yeah, the Hollow, I'm not gonna go into a ton of detail about it because the Hollow is an evolving thing. It's just starting probably of what they plan to have it to be. But yes, it's a sort of privately owned complex in the middle of the woods. As you said, they had armed guards. I was the one who posted the photos of those guards on social media in camo and AR-15s with a bunch of kids around getting masks, stuff signed with armed guards. I mean, obviously that gets your attention. Why is this? Why do they need these guys there? And then, yes, as we've seen, they've hosted just 2 school board candidates. Recently, Karen Rose was out there, and we posted a video of her admitting that CRT is not taught in Sarasota schools. I thought that was interesting to post.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, we've seen the gun signups. I mean, it's unclear at the present time exactly what they have in mind out there, but I will say that it seems like they want that to be a haven or a launching point for whatever they're up to. And I think whatever they're up to is, from what I've seen, is pretty scary.
Pretty extreme. Yeah, one of the things, so knowing that there's this place, right, in South County where they're using assault weapons to guard a child's mask waiver event. I mean, however you feel about masks in school, why in the world would you need assault weapons to guard that event, right? I look at it and go, here you are, Governor DeSantis, saying you need a you need a state guard. Is this going to be one of your spots? That's just my, I don't know, but it's really concerning.
It's clear that they want to form a militia here in Sarasota, and that would be sort of a home base for it. That I think is fairly obvious.
Yeah.
Now, what that's going to look like, how big it's going to be, all of that, what it's going to do, I don't know. But clearly they feel very safe here in Sarasota that law enforcement is not going to interfere with whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Because they may have law enforcement members. I mean, I could tell you, I went to the Trump rally here in Sarasota, sort of incognito. I just blend in, I watch,
Yeah.
I take pictures, I film.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a lot of police officers there off duty, a lot.
Yeah.
From Sarasota. So it kind of, again, it's unnerving. Who do you report something to? Who do you talk to when you don't know if that person could be out there shooting at the Hollow the next day, you know, that you're reporting it to. So it's a little disconcerting.
Yeah, very, very much so. So there's two things I'd like to get to. Let's the cracks that may be starting to be seen among the folks claiming there was election fraud. And I think you might have tweeted about this. The attorney Lynn Wood is backing away from Sidney Powell and some of these other folks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, one of my missions, as far as just shining a spotlight on a lot of the right-wing extremism that is happening in this country, and the candidates who are embracing it more and more, political candidates, is also to divide, because they all talk a lot of crap about each other. They trash each other all the time in their own little groups and chat rooms and meetings. And what we do is we sign up. We go in there anonymously. We act like we're part of the team. We're part of the group. We go in there and we record what they're saying about each other. And then we post it for the world to see. Hey, this is what Lynn Wood is saying about you. Hey, this is what Michael Flynn is saying about this person. And we let them know, and we cause havoc that way.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, the thing is, it's not us causing it. We're just exposing what's there, the reality of it. And we're just letting, and so if I can create division and dissension among these groups, that has definitely been one of my missions from day one, is to put them against each other. And it's something Republicans have done to Democrats, by the way, for decades.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats have always been an uneasy coalition of different groups that kind of hang out with each other every couple of years when there's an election, but they're not necessarily always cohesive. The Republican Party has never been like that. It's always been more monolithic, lockstep, disciplined. And so I'm trying to make the Republican Party kind of more like, do to them what they've done to the Democrats, which is create wedges, divide as much as I can to try and stop what's happening.
Yeah. So to bring it around to, you know, as you said earlier in the show, the election of 2016, it is absolutely true that Donald Trump was able to tap into some feeling and bring in people who had not voted before. And that those folks were, you know, not the folks that the traditional Republicans were used to dealing with. But, you know, Ron, you and I came up in the same era, and I voted for Ronald Reagan. And I believed the supply side economic stuff. And I've been very fortunate in my life, you know, in terms of materials. And I don't believe it anymore. And the folks who are so upset, I think what's underneath it, that the Democrats do not speak to effectively at all, is the last 40 years, you have not seen an increase in your wages, the working people of this country. We have slavery now. It's just called minimum wage. And you cannot keep up with your expenses. And originally in this country, the standard deduction was the amount of money that you needed to cover your expenses. It never kept up with that. You know, we weren't supposed to be taxing people beyond, it was all supposed to be the discretionary income, not what you needed to live on. And what's ironic to me is the very people that these folks are being activated by, like Donald Trump, and pulled into and given an outlet for their anger, are the ones who are throwing them under the bus economically.
Yeah.
Totally.
Because for them, it's not about economics, it's about culture.
Right. Well, that's the true meaning of identity politics. The identity politics is I'm going to vote for the person that I identify with, even though they're throwing me under the bus. And I would rather identify with them than actually look at how I am being, just ripped off. And I look at the Democratic Party and I'm like, you all are not effectively speaking to these folks. And the Republican Party has been dancing and been very effective at keeping them asleep and, giving them something else to focus on. And I'm curious, one fellow history student to another, what's your take on that?
I think that there's a something happening in the Democratic Party right now with respect to all of the Republicans who have come over. And there's a decent number of us, maybe a couple of 100,000, but there's several of us in different groups that are active, involved in Democratic campaigns now. And you have like the different groups like Republican Accountability, the Lincoln Project, the people with the Bulwark, Tim Miller and Charlie Sykes and those people. I mean, there's all these different ex-Republican groups, and I'm kind of my own entity. And I think that there's an uneasy sort of feeling among Democrats about that. And as far as like, are these guys, can we really trust them? Are they just grifters? Are they really on our team? And earning trust is a big part of it. But I think that we can bring a lot to the table because most of us are more ruthless. I would say tougher, thicker skin.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't like the whole snowflake, liberals or snowflake. I don't agree with that. But I do think that there is a meaner, tougher, more real politics streak to us.
Yeah.
And I think that the Democrats need to work with our tactics and just let us do our thing. And I often say, like, if you don't want to get your hands dirty, that's fine. Let us just get out of the way and let us do it for you. We're happy to do it. And I think most Democrats understand, that it's beneficial. But then you have some that don't think that. You have like Don Winslow and AOC and these different groups that want nothing to do with us. And
see,
so
that's the part.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
We're fighting for the survival of our republic. We can't have infighting. We can't afford it right now.
No, and that's where it's like, the founding fathers understood that partisan politics could really be a problem. I ran as an independent for county commission because I was concerned about what I was seeing. But I came to really understand the party is so helpful. You need the organization to make things happen. But when it becomes about loyalty to a party instead of, the bigger picture, we're definitely in trouble. So I know you need to leave. Ron,
Yes,
you've got a meeting at 4.
I got a judge who's going to get mad in a few minutes.
That's right. You've got to scoot. How do we follow you on Twitter?
My name, just Ron Filipkowski, Filip. Anybody can follow me, and hopefully join. I mean, another part of what I do is look, I try to put out content that you can share with friends and family members who are apathetic or independents or moderate Republicans. Show them the stuff I put out there because it's for them. It's not just for liberals.
Right.
It's to help convince those people in the middle to come over to our side. It's a big part of what I do. And so follow me and share with your Republican friends and relatives my stuff. They might not like it, but keep putting it in front of them.
It'll make them
might
think.
work.
It might. Yeah. Ron, thanks so much for all you're doing out there. I appreciate it. It's great to talk with you. And I would love to have you back to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on out there. And if you need to leave, please feel free.
Okay,
I know you have a meeting. Everybody, thank you so much. You've been listening.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. You've been listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. If drinking's no longer fun for you and separates you from other people, you can attend an AA meeting. They've been there. More information is available by phone at 941-951-6810 or online at aasrq.org. And many of you may know I am serving on the Charter Review Committee in the city of Sarasota. We are meeting this coming Monday, December 13th at 6 p.m. And I encourage those of you in the city who care about what's happening with our local constitution, our charter, to attend or watch and let us know what you think. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Stay tuned to more great public affairs programming on WSLR. Make it a great day.